Hello, and welcome to Navigating Neurodiversity, the podcast where we explore the spectrum and neurospicy life. I'm your host, Megan Anderson, fellow ADHDer, neurodiversity coach, and founder at Kaleidoscope.Support. It all began with my late diagnosis and my daughters, when the spectrum became my life and my calling. Now I share everything I've learned to make navigating neurodiversity easier for others. Thank you for tuning in today. I can't wait to share our next episode with you. Welcome to Navigating Neurodiversity with Kaleidoscope.Support, the podcast where we explore the vibrant world of the spectrum. I'm your host, Megan Anderson, neurodiversity coach and fellow ADHDer. I took the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. This line by Robert Frost captured my attention as a child, and it very much played out in real life, especially as I raised neurodivergent children. I did it my way might be the neurodiversity creed. As a caregiver and someone on the spectrum myself, we don't shy away from the hard stuff here. I've had my ups and downs and learned much along the way that helped me make things more manageable. We share new insights, research, and perspectives from the community to broaden our view of the spectrum. We hope that transparency will help bring more awareness and understanding. Our content is focused on neurodiversity, including autism, ADHD, and AUDHD. If you are on the spectrum, we'd love to hear from you. I'm so excited you're joining us today as we share our new podcast. Today, we'll be diving into one of our new recent posts on mindful parenting approaches for supporting neurodivergent children with autism or ADHD. As we dive into today's episode on mindful parenting approaches, we'll start with beginning by the fact that parenting is an eventful journey. It can come with many challenges, and there is no instruction manual. It's beautiful, scary, and a little bit of everything all at once. Some unique experiences might pop up whenever you're raising neurodivergent children. It's essential to appreciate that each child is different. Recognizing their individual needs is how you create a nurturing space. Mindful parenting can be a powerful method to support emotional, social, and cognitive development. In this post, we'll dive into some of those needs of neurodivergent children, share practical mindfulness techniques, and explore how to cultivate a supportive environment tailored specifically for children with ADHD or autism. As an ADHD parent of two on the spectrum, I'll share methods that we have found that worked for our neurodivergent family over the years. Before we dive too far, I want to begin by sharing one of our first resources, our Neurodiversity Vocabulary Guide. As you get into the world of the spectrum, you might come across many new terms. Here we have listed some of the most common and a few of the more uncommon terms in order to share with you that resource. It really opened our eyes whenever our children were first diagnosed to understand some of these new terms. Having the right vocabulary can really help close that gap in understanding. So as we move right along, I want to hop down here and dive right into understanding those needs a little bit better. Neurodiversity affirming care acknowledges that neurological differences like ADHD and autism are a diverse part of the human experience. Children with these conditions often think, learn, and communicate differently, leading to some unique challenges and unique strengths or abilities as well. As a society, we are still working to move beyond the outdated deficit based views of the past to help everyone embrace and understand neurodiversity better. Studies show that nearly 6.1 million children in the US are diagnosed with ADHD and struggle with attention, impulse control, and organization. On the other hand, 1 in 44 children receive an autism diagnosis. Understanding and embracing their differences can enable parents to view their children's behavior through a lens of patience and empathy. Awareness of these needs enables caregivers to adopt strategies tailored to their unique characteristics. Some children might want to show varying degrees of sensory sensitivity, or they might require specific routines that provide them with a sense of security. Recognizing these signs early, being watchful of emotional cues, and creating channels for open communication are vital components of mindful parenting for these children. Getting educated about neurodiversity and your child's diagnosis is one of the best ways to help improve their outcomes now and later. Because neurodiversity is so complex and nuanced, and because it is never exactly the same for anyone on the spectrum, what works for one may not work for another. Many parents will have to test different strategies and techniques before they find the right routines that work for their family. Remember to have patience with yourself and your children while figuring it out. I'm going to pause here and jump to a couple of other resources that I want to share. One is for those picky eaters. I was one of those kids who really struggled with sensory sensitivities. This is our ASD diet guide for picky eaters. Also works for those with ADHD, but more common with our children with autism and restrictive eating habits. So, this really dives into some of the background of why this happens with avoidant restrictive food intake disorder and gives you some real clear tips for meal planning, introducing new foods, and then also a little bit of nutrition guidance and a sensory food list. So that's all there for you. And one of the things that I really wanted to mention at the beginning of this guide is this study. We did a really comprehensive review of all the medical literature regarding diet and nutrition and its impact on ADHD or autism and their symptoms. So that's all really great information for parents who are looking at diet and how that may contribute to the symptoms. It doesn't cause autism or ADHD in any way, and I want to be very clear about that, but it can agitate symptoms further with some types of foods. And so please take a look at that list. The other thing to share is our courses. We have an ADHD and an Autism 101 course for caregivers, parents, or educators and other providers, anyone who is really interested in coming to learn. It's a self paced course to explore the diagnosis, and it completely explains the subtypes and more to provide a better understanding. It covers symptoms, causes and risks, treatments, screening options online, living with it, and other complications to inform you. So, as we go right back, let's talk a little bit more about some of those techniques for parents. Mindfulness is really essential for parents who are navigating the complexities of raising neurodivergent children. The ups and downs can really feel like a roller coaster when things are off track. But in the midst of the chaos and confusion, what kids need most from our parents is that sense of security, safety, and acceptance. Parents have to keep their cool to de escalate whenever things go awry or whenever kids go into those meltdown modes. We've all been there when the escalating goes the other way. As parents, when we lose our cool, it often comes with a pile of regret. Life can be hard without children, but with them, it's really important to remember that even on our hard days, they don't really have the context to understand why we're stressed or worried as an adult. We're modeling our behavior on the good days and the bad days. It's okay to make mistakes, we all do along the way. Again, there was no instruction manual, but we do have to model accountability as much as anything else if we want to teach them that skill. Clarifying and apologizing for our own misbehavior when we're not proud of how we act helps them learn to do the same. Also, creating a safe space for them to admit mistakes is really important. If they are fearful of the reaction they are going to receive for being honest about messing up, they are going to likely hide it or deny it. Becoming more mindful yourself will also help you create more mindful children. This will help create that cycle of balance when everyone can regulate their own mood better. The opposite is also true. If everyone is dysregulated in the household in different ways and struggling to cope on their own, this can compound the stress, the overwhelm, and cause more friction. To model the behavior you hope to see in them, there are several techniques to consider. The first one, and really the most important, is practicing self-awareness. Whenever you or in the moment with your child, take a moment to understand your feelings and reactions to their behaviors. For instance, if they are struggling with transitions, you might get frustrated in the middle of it. Instead of reacting out of frustration, use calming strategies like deep breathing or counting to 10 to try to roll back that response for yourself. Being aware of your emotional state, you can respond more effectively to your child's needs. If we escalate, they are more likely to continue to as well. Some children on the spectrum develop types of hypervigilance or notice patterns that might even apply to the behaviors of others. They might be tuned into their surroundings, to others, or even sense their parents' discomfort or emotional states without necessarily understanding why. They might have differences in mirror neuron function that can impact how they process or share information with others. Some pick up on cues easily, while others struggle to notice social cues. Understanding that you are the primary role model for their emotional and behavioral development is important. Sometimes, as a parent, I found myself triggered with my daughters over the years. Often, in those times when I lost my way in a moment, I could find a piece of my trauma lurking underneath if I honestly reflected on it. I lost patience with them in ways that my caregivers or teachers had lost patience with me. And in many ways, I justified it that way at first. But over time, some of these ways were simply not effective for my first daughter, who struggled with ASD, a PDA profile, and other health challenges from very early childhood. I could not use the same tough love approaches that were used on me, with a child who was already struggling in so many other ways. Any use of excess pressure just resulted in further escalation and challenging meltdowns. Remarks about how we were spoiling her only stung when we were at our wits' ends and were trying to approach things to get better results, while still maintaining some kind of compassion for a child that was in crisis mode very often. We were not trying to spoil her. We were trying to help keep her alive and provide all of our family with a measure of sanity to face the next day, which would be coming with fresh challenges. We compromised. We made accommodations. We also went to doctors, therapists, psychiatrists, and much more to help her. People often mean well whenever they give advice, but they don't always understand the shoes you were walking in. She had suffered in ways that others had no idea about, because mental health and neurological functions are often under the surface. She really struggled with anxiety at school with her peers. Her ability to mask in public in some situations when she was much younger made it harder for others to comprehend the switch in behavior when she melted down or had other challenges she could not navigate later. I say this to express that the ideas around levels and functioning can be somewhat misleading based on our experience and on some stories we've heard from other parents. Regression is real and possible. She could mask and pretend for small periods of time, but constantly felt lots of anxiety and easily slipped into meltdowns, dysregulated states, or emotional outbursts. She struggled to pay attention in class and was far more creative than academic. Spikes in her hormones as a teen began to impact her symptoms even further. She began to be embarrassed with her peers over and over, and she began to withdraw further and further at school, eventually becoming so resistant that she dropped out in 10th grade. It was becoming more of a struggle to force her to go, and it disrupted everything for months until we relented after speaking with a guidance counselor. Her teachers unanimously agreed, due to her mental health and continual struggle with peers and engaging in class, that she would benefit from pursuing a GED or some other alternative learning path. It was a really hard decision because she had come so far already, but her mental health was more important than earning her diploma, and she could not continue to maintain both. Within a year, she was unfortunately diagnosed with adolescent schizophrenia due to complications from prescribed medications interacting poorly. Now we know her struggles were greater than we understood at that time because she was so terrified of sharing all she was beginning to experience as that condition progressed. It is really rare. Less than 1% of the US population is diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it is even less common when occurring before 18 years old. Some studies explore any potential links between autism and schizophrenia, and I've got that shared as well. And they have found that schizophrenia is linked. In fact, youth with ASD are 3 to 6 times more likely to develop schizophrenia than their neurotypical counterparts. Even so, it is still very rare, even among neurodivergent children. So I share all this information as one of those caregivers who had to face many questions about that uncommon condition, in case it helps others. If someone you care for is diagnosed with schizophrenia, we would love to talk to you about that experience. We're collecting stories to host a future podcast episode on this topic, and we would really love to gather some of these perspectives from others who have dealt with it. Now, back to our discussion on autism. I really want to discuss a little more deeply the experience of autism. Okay, let's talk about autism and why it is regarded as a spectrum for a minute. It is very nuanced and it is complex. It is neurodevelopmental and it lasts for a lifetime. It can impact sensory differences, information processing, executive functioning, nervous system regulation, can cause stimming or repetitive behaviors, impact emotional regulation, or cause communication differences, just to name a few. The other thing that I want to talk about briefly is the sensory differences and the regulation cycle, because this is really important. And it's a very big part of why we see meltdowns and triggering within autism or ADHD. So, the first thing to understand is that sensory processing may be hyper or hypoactive in one or more senses and plays a major role in the automatic signals such as hunger or things like thirst and other emotional responses. Some experience difficulty identifying, expressing, or controlling emotions due to the processing differences, while others are hyper empathetic or overly emotional and emotive. Information processing and how the brain and nervous system signal information may also vary for people on the spectrum. And then finally, being able to maintain regulation because of that sensory processing and other physical conditions may all play a role in causing disruptions to that regulation cycle. The other thing is that we really cannot define the spectrum narrowly. Every individual on the spectrum experiences it uniquely. It can impact any gender. It does not depend on demographics like location, age, or anything else. It can also span across the IQ scale from below average up to gifted or high intelligence. It is neurodevelopmental and it does last a lifetime. In terms of like the values, beliefs, interests, or like habits or hobbies. Some have a strong sense of justice. Some have monotropic focus or special interests. Some have learning disabilities co-occurring, while others can be leading experts in their field. Some are creatively talented with music, excuse me, arts, or other domains, while they may experience social or the communication challenges at the same time. Finally, I want to talk a little bit more about the levels of autism and why they can be misunderstood and a bit controversial. Typically, um, people speak in regards to levels with regards to support. So, level 1 is a lower support needs, level 2, more moderate support needs, and a level 3 is profound or higher support needs. And this is really focused on the amount of support that they need day to day on average or overall. But it is important to understand that anyone on the spectrum may experience varying levels of support needs situationally. During a meltdown, any level could need considerable support. When dysregulated, sick, burnt out, or in shutdown, they could need more support. Addressing any unmet needs first and creating a more comfortable sensory experience will probably help. For any level, if fight or flight is activated in the nervous system, the ability to process information logically or control emotion during those times is more offline. Because it impacts executive functioning when activated, Their autonomy may also feel threatened where they're in that fight or flight mode. So again, a level 1 can have meltdowns, shutdowns, stimming, self-harming, avoidant behaviors, sensory issues, coordination challenges, and more. The symptoms may not be as pronounced or persistent as a level 3, but they do exist, and you still have to help them navigate it all. A child with more profound autism or severe combined ADHD type will definitely need more support than those milder cases. To give you an example, I am AUDHD, level 1 ASD, and combined ADHD type. One of my daughters was autistic, and the other is an inattentive type of ADHD. All hyperlexic and high masking. And really, it's important to note here, and this is something I wrote a book about because it's such a nuanced area in neurodiversity. The verbal and masking ability really kept us from earlier diagnosis sooner. Really, they didn't take our neurodiversity as seriously as they did the mood levels of the challenges. But let me just say, lifelong anxiety is not normal. Why are these kids so anxious? For me, it was 90% the sensory differences that I really didn't have the vocabulary to describe. But once I did understand the language, I learned that I had misophonia, which is characterized by strong negative reactions to certain sounds or repetitive noises. As in, it could literally trigger my fight or flight to hear those repetitive sounds. And I now attribute this in part to a car accident when I was young, at least in particular, the sound becoming more of a trigger. Because when I had a really terrible accident in my 20s later, and my nervous system went through some damage again, I went through that deer in headlights mode again. And again, the sound became my number one trigger. It was like 10x level of the problem again. And it was just like when I was really little and I was so sensitive to everything. I was very much in that state again, and went through about a year of recovery before my nervous system came out of that almost constant fight or flight triggering by sound alone. So I really want to emphasize the importance of understanding that sensory experiences of can be a very traumatic experience for someone on the spectrum, even from very benign, like everyday things that would not cause someone else that kind of discomfort. Um, we'll get into that a little bit more as we go here. One of the other things that I want to mention here is that I also realized as someone late diagnosed that it was not really anyone's fault when I was growing up, that they did not have the right language to describe what was going on with me either, or understand the right direction to send me for a diagnosis. I really annoyed others with my picky eating habits, for example. And even though I'm still that picky eater to this day, I was never doing it to be a brat. Just like other people with avoidant habits with eating and restrictive sensory processing, I was really trying to prevent myself from gagging involuntarily. It's really uncomfortable and just an awful thing for a kid to experience involuntarily. So the other thing that was really interesting is that I also learned to hide most of my stimming. I did things like pop my knuckles or sway much more moderately. Like moderation is the key to the way I began masking very young. Mostly because I was constantly being told to sit still, to slow down, to stop talking so fast, and many other things of this nature related to my movements. When I was very young, cousins joked, could you even speak if you stopped using your hands? So definitely was always being noticed for the way that I spoke and moved slightly differently or lacked coordination because I was also falling, tumbling, and getting those mystery bruises from time to time. One of the things that I really want to again stress here, though, is that a neurodivergent diagnosis has nothing to do with IQ directly. Both autism and ADHD can occur at any level on the IQ scale, but it can co occur with other learning abilities or learning disabilities that can impact their information processing or academic performance. So that can include academically challenged or gifted children. I was considered a gifted student, and so was my youngest daughter, but we were also both neurodivergent. The term for that now is twice exceptional, meaning you have the gift of intelligence, but also the gift of neurodiversity. However, there were many times in life that I did not really feel like I had a gift. And if I did, that gift made people not like me as much. So I would have given it back when I was younger. I feel differently now, having matured and come through to a side where I have more regulation. Um, However, it definitely was something I struggled with as a child. Um, there is also a real struggle between the representation associated with the labels of neurodiversity. And so I really want to stress that the current view that it is a spectrum is most accurate. There is not really more autistic or less autistic, like it's a straight line. There are levels of severity related to the average amount of challenge day to day due to their specific neurotype, and that encompasses multiple areas of their experience. Again, it's really not linear, it's more like a pie chart. Here's an example from Psychology Today that shows the results of an ASD assessment. You can see some of the things that they'll be looking at would include whether or not meltdowns are common, stimming, looking at whether or not there's anxiety, restrictive interests, communication problems, executive functioning issues, a need for routine, sensitivities to noise, texture, lights, or other things, having any social issues, or having trouble with keeping eye contact or maintaining eye contact. So, one of the other things to mention here is that often neurodivergent children struggle due more to social anxiety and other factors while at school that can impact how they perform or behave there. It's not necessarily always just like a learning ability. Um, However, if learning difficulties are present, it could be more specific, such as dyslexia, auditory processing issues, or other co-occurring conditions. So that's something to consider if you're really seeing some challenge there. The other thing is that, again, the other side of this coin is that some of these kids are incredibly gifted in one or multiple domains. And so it can be incredibly unfair to classify ability based on certain test scores alone. Some children are incredible artists, musicians, dancers, or skilled in other ways that are valuable and that should be embraced, that will never show up on a standardized test. Helping them embrace those areas that they do enjoy and helping them thrive with those can really help boost their confidence to learn harder things later. As a gifted student, I just want to lay out that that can sometimes feel more like a burden of expectation. I was supposed to be able to perform highly, and so I pushed myself to achieve that ideal continually, often to the point of burnout. Strengths in one area also does not negate that they may struggle significantly in other areas. Setting expectations evenly across the board is where parents sometimes struggle with their neurodivergent kids. They may seem mature in some aspects while underdeveloped in others at the same time. And this contrast is one of those things that you'll have to help them navigate as well. And as much as that might frustrate us as caregivers, it definitely frustrates them more internally to feel those differences with us and with others in those interactions. I can remember many jokes about how I was so book smart, um, but very immature or lacking in common sense. And I remember that feeling like a rubber band. Um, was I smart or stupid? Or how could I be both at the same time? It really was confusing to me. And having that kind of interaction with people all the time um, was really, really off-putting over time. And really, I began to, you know, it wasn't until I was diagnosed that I understood and I looked back on all these memories and understood that it was the naivety and that I was missing social cues. I was completely missing social cues in conversation and all kinds of other ways. And this is why I struggled with friendships, coworkers, and other situations. It was because I was autistic and I trusted far more than I should, often missing red flags, and even being taken advantage of, in some situations because of that. And it was just because I viewed the world very differently the way that I experienced it. And so learning to have more patience for ourselves is how we begin to cultivate more patience for others. Gentle parenting is not really an easier road than any other type of parenting, but it is a path that is more likely to generate healthy outcomes later for neurodivergent children. It is okay if your family's routines or daily life differ from others. We're all just trying to find our way and figure it out as we go. It can certainly be a wild ride, and we're doing the best we can with the resources we have. I understand that there are so many factors to consider. Knowing yourself and healing yourself will help you get to know them better and respond to them better with more presence and empathy. Throughout my journey raising my girls, as I learned to tune into my own emotions better, I was able to handle their ups and downs better as well. Before my diagnosis, I struggled to maintain, and after I was finally able to make sense of that chaos that had seemed to surround me my whole life. One of the next things we want to talk about is the importance of embracing active listening or alternative communication in some of these families. So, active listening is more than hearing words. It really involves being fully present and engaged with your child. When they share their thoughts or feelings, try to turn off distractions. For example, if they're having a really rough day, show that you're listening by repeating back their concerns. This practice helps them feel more understood. And this is a crucial need for these children with ADHD or autism who may often feel overlooked or misunderstood day to day. Children on the spectrum might process information or sensory signals differently or experience emotions or bodily input differently. They may struggle with focus, attention, executive functioning, planning, multitasking, and so much more. And all of these types of differences in the way they experience the world can create more challenges for them. Some are nonverbal or experience selective mutism, while others are hyperlexic like me and have trouble slowing down their speech. This is one example of why it is not um, good to generalize the experience of neurodiversity. We call it a spectrum because it presents in such a variety of ways and because it is so different for everyone. Social engagement is another example of how this is different. Some are socially averse to others and really do not appreciate the forced inclusion. Some kids are considered overly friendly, like I was. They were naive or even run up to strangers easily. And then others still want to have friends, but they struggle to keep them. So the experience of neurodiversity is as unique as the individual, and their preferences might be as well. Giving them the space to express those differences, those experiences, and their feelings is important to help them develop a healthy sense of security, esteem, identity, boundaries, and more. They often feel forced to mask in some situations in public and need the space to be authentic and unmasked at home to recharge that social battery. For example, our children could behave for teachers and other authority figures, but it seemed like they would be completely unleashed as soon as they got home when they were really little. We spent a lot of time frustrated before we understood what was really going on. It was because we did not understand the concept of masking at that time. But let me explain that for you. When we instruct our kids to stop stimming, to sit still, to make eye contact, or to engage in physical contact, anything of that nature, to fit social norms, we are creating a masking behavior. To put a mask on and stop that natural inclination that they do feel requires energy and effort to maintain. It can feel exhausting and even painful for them to need to mask for acceptance. In classrooms or other groups, they may have to do this to participate. So, creating for them to be how they are rather than continually pushing them into even more molds at home is how we can create a real sanctuary for them. They need that space to express freely and balance with the public spaces where they have to learn to have more control for integration. Do they want to dance in a cape, repeating the same song 11 times? Is this tiresome sometimes? Yes. Is it important to let them sometimes? Also, yes. If you have a child who repeats things, it could be that they are teaching themselves to learn language or process language. Seriously. Gestalt language processing, or GLP, is a theory that explores how some autistic children and individuals are often learning to communicate um, or acquire language through memorization and pattern recognition of phrases rather than individual words. So, if they tend to repeat certain sounds, phrases, songs, or sound bites, this could be a sign of GLP. For those who are nonverbal, you might want to consider AAC devices as an alternative means of communicating with the help of a speech therapist to develop skills. These devices are more accessible and a little more affordable than they were in the past, and this could open up a whole new way of communicating for your family. There are some wonderful examples of this technology working well for other families, and the link here does show some of the comparison of the top 10 devices currently on the market. And you can go and take a look at that whenever you want, if that is of interest to you. We also have a really, really helpful list of additional resources on our website. And at the bottom of that page, there is another really long list of technology accommodations for browser extensions, digital assistants, AI tools, and more that can actually really, really help as assistive technology. In our experience as a neurodivergent family, each of us really had a lot of difference in terms of our needs and preferences. Some of us are sensory sensitive and avoidant of those things like certain sounds, textures, foods, even scents or bright lights. So simple things like chores or even making lunch can become much more complicated when you have sensory issues to consider. At the same time, we struggled with traditional routines in the past. It seemed like a constant battle between the ADHD and autism, with half of the house fighting for the need for routine and the other half fighting to keep a routine of any kind. I had to intentionally create a new lifestyle that was not based around a traditional 9 to 5 schedule to fit my family and balance my own needs. I worked remotely for most of my career for this reason. I could handle things more situationally as they came up for the kids during the day and pick up on any of those remaining tasks from work at night when things were more quiet. The other thing that we really do to embrace our family's neurodiversity is that we create cozy life at home. We intentionally create space for comfort, rest, and provide accommodations as much as possible. We respect our differences in those communication styles and those preferences as much as we can, and we really don't have to mask here. We also have control of the environment to reduce those triggers. And I want to just emphasize it's not about total avoidance. There's always going to be compromises, but there really is no reason to create extra discomfort at home if we understand what those triggers are and can easily avoid them with simple accommodations. Nervous system regulation is the goal, and that creates more space for everyone. There's a really, really great resource from the Cardiff School of Psychology. It is a wonderful sensory room guide, and we really think that this is an excellent resource. We'll post a link in the article as well. All of this is there for you to follow up on if you want to go and learn more. But I just want to briefly run through a couple of things here to explain kind of the purpose. So the sensory room is really for active and passive engagement of the senses, and it's a form of adaptability and accommodation. It can be used in your home. It can also be used in classrooms or even in providers' offices to create a more sensory safe space for these kids. Some of the things that you could use would be visual things like bubble tubes, mirror balls, projectors, tactile boards, or colored lights in the room. Another thing that you could do is auditory, music players, touch light or sound boards, or even voice changers. Can be really fun for the younger kids. If you wanted to, again, add tactile things like the wall boards, discs, or fiber optics. You can also use toys or the AAC devices or other things like that to enhance communication. Things like visual um, routines or cues can really help as well. So those are some of the quick things that I wanted to touch on there. Again, get this guide if you want more information there. It is available on the link in the website for a direct download from their website. The other thing is that we really wanted to help them become more independent and self-reliant as possible as they got older. That really meant helping them and then letting them make mistakes and eventually letting them try to start solving some of those problems on their own as they got older to develop more of that critical thinking for themselves. Um, but if you don't establish open communication when they're small, they might not come to you later when you really wish they would. So when you get into things as teens and we're facing, circumstances with peers or situations that are, you know, scarier circumstances. Again, I feel like when we're driving and have all these other things to consider, you really want to have that trust built up by that point so that they'll come to you in those times of need. So active listening when they're little is really going to help build that bridge for when they're older. And we worked really hard to cultivate that relationship with our daughters. But kids still hide things sometimes. And it's really how we handle the truth when they eventually share it that matters most. Approaching them with patience and empathy and curiosity rather than judgment can really help open that door. It can be really hard to face shame or embarrassment for mistakes. So if you really want the whole story, try to hold back and don't react too soon. The next thing that I really want to spend some time on is speaking about transitions and why mindful transitions can help with task switching for kids on the spectrum. Transitions can be really daunting for neurodivergent children or adults. Mindful transitions prepare your child for changes in routine. Consider consider using visual schedules or timers to make shifting from one activity to another smoother. Research finds that using visual aids can reduce anxiety significantly for children on the spectrum, providing them with that structure and more predictability. Here's an example of a visual chore chart that we found on Etsy. There are plenty of options out there on Etsy, Pinterest, or other sites. Just quickly go and search for printable chore charts for kids or daily routine cards. Those are really great searches. There's also some pre-made options for sale at some of the large retailers like Amazon or Walmart if you do not want to deal with like any of the DIY or you just want a larger scale. They also have some larger printables. So let's explain a little bit more about why the task switching can be a challenge. Anxiety, which is related to unexpected change, to the ability to complete tasks successfully or not, to how they will handle any unknown details, or how to navigate in groups or certain environments. They could have executive functioning challenges, and this refers to a set of cognitive processes that manages thoughts, actions, and behaviors which can impact skills that are crucial for daily tasks like planning, problem solving, or adapting to new situations. They also might have monotropic interest or special interests, which causes them to focus on a particular topic or activity. They can also have hyperfocus, which is something like tunnel vision, where they fall into this mode where they don't see anything else, they don't think about anything else, and they can truly even miss further internal signals like hunger and thirst when they're in that hyper focus mode. Attention issues, so they may also struggle to maintain focus and attention for long periods of time. So these are all reasons that task switching and routine change can be difficult for them. So one of the ways that we can help overcome the resistance sometimes whenever we have our children on the spectrum is creating more novelty for demanding tasks. For example, music while cleaning can help make it more fun rather than just demanding. The other thing is to help them single task. Multitasking can feel productive in the moment, but it often leads to many tasks being half done and none being finished. Especially for those ADHD kids with the inattentive type, they can easily lose focus on one task and move on to another before completing it and then forget to come back to the original task. You might find half open cabinets or other signs that they were there and then got distracted. So again, helping them focus on single tasks with clear instructions is often the best way to help them. And sometimes written instructions or charts and those visual cues really can help compared to just verbally telling them. If they have verbal processing challenges, this is a real big one. They can use that environment for cues rather than constantly asking you or trying to remember it themselves, which is sometimes hard for them to do. And then again, on timing, events, or task demands, if changes must occur, try to give them as much notice as possible to help them initiate without so much anxiety. Next, we're going to take a minute to talk about creating mindful moments. Carving out some special time each day for mindful moments is a really great intentional practice. Activities that promote mindfulness, like yoga, guided meditation, or walking in nature, can help. Encouraging your child to focus on their senses during these activities, for example, identifying 5 things they can see, 4 things they could touch, and so on. Engaging in those senses during these exercises cultivates calmness and helps them promote that inner awareness. When there are disruptions between the mind and body signaling and processing, interoception, or the body's ability to sense and interpret internal states like hunger, thirst, and pain, might be impacted. Alternatively, proprioception, or the body's ability to sense its position and movement in space, may also be affected. And this is a crucial system for movement, and it helps you move without constantly relying on visual input, helps you maintain balance and coordination. Either of those systems, interoception or proprioception, may be impacted whenever you're on the spectrum. And in those cases, things like vestibular input, occupational therapy, or other physical therapies may also be beneficial for helping with more of that mind-body integration. Helping them to tune into their body while focusing their minds through mindful moments or guiding them through intentional movement with play is a great way to help them build esteem and self-regulation skills. One of the things we'd like to invite you to do is to consider joining one of our online group classes focused on meditation or mindfulness techniques if you want a space that you could come and join to learn together. Finally, let's talk about how we can really model that mindfulness. Children really learn by imitating adults. When you're practicing mindfulness, it's more likely that they will pick up those habits. So share your practices, discuss your feelings, and explain how you're handling daily challenges. For instance, when you're stressed from work, express how you plan to unwind. Perhaps you like to read before bed. This helps build that connection and encourages them to seek constructive strategies for addressing their own emotions or stress. Modeling self-regulation and self-care is a good way to set that healthy example for them. The converse is also true. If we partake in unhealthy coping mechanisms in front of them, don't model healthy emotional regulation, or neglect self-care, that can leave an influence as well, because children often do what they see us do rather than just what we say. And In the past, I often put my care at the end of the list after family, work, and all the other responsibilities. The result was a mom in burnout who was way more moody with everyone than I wanted to be. It really took years for me to accept that getting support was a good thing. Back then, I struggled in silence from shame, from fear, and a host of other reasons that I made up in my own mind to keep me from asking for help or admitting that I felt so overwhelmed. I felt like I was supposed to have it all together and that admitting I needed help was a sign I had failed. I now know that was simply not true. And here I am offering support to others as a neurodiversity coach now, just because I understand how wrong I was and because I've been in those shoes. There are so many ways that I used to build up resistance in my own mind. I really laugh now thinking of how stubborn I was, of how hyper independent I was, and also how tired I was all the time. My busyness and dark circles were like a badge of honor. My productivity and the racing mind were always on, trying to keep up until I hit a wall and crashed into burnout. A vicious cycle I repeated over and over. I was a proud workaholic and constant people pleaser for years. I was trying to be everything to everyone at all times, and that usually was everything except what I wanted, which came after. I feel really sorry for that version of me and for other people who are neurodivergent that are trapped in those same kinds of patterns. I wish I had this awareness and understanding then, but if I had known what I know now, I would not have taken the steps that led me here. I masked so much of my own authentic personality and hid so much of my struggle to fit in with a neurotypical society growing up because I was late diagnosed. And that profoundly impacted my identity and my journey as a parent. Now I share what I learned along the way because I wish I had some of this information sooner rather than in hindsight. If I can save anyone else from heartache or headaches, I am happy to. We won't shy away from the hard stuff here because that is the kind of transparency we need to create around neurodiversity to understand it better. The more we focus on our families rather than comparing our lives to those of others, the more fulfilled and grateful we can be for our unique journey, our unique kids, and our experience raising them. The truth is, parenting is a really tough job. Working parents often feel pressure to keep up or that they are unable to keep up with other areas. Parents at home often feel trapped by repeating the same type of day over and over while struggling to juggle it all in more isolation. Parenting is hard work no matter how you approach it, and raising a little human is no small feat after all. The fact that you are reading something like this or listening in means that you care and are trying to do your best. I'd like to take a few more minutes as we're closing out to talk about how we can create a supportive environment for our kids. One of the first things you can really do is to help organize their space. Um, Creating a structured and organized environment tailored to their needs to help them reduce distractions, outline areas for certain items, designate a place for toys, minimize clutter, any of those kinds of things to help them have more structure and organization. According to research, children benefit significantly from organized spaces, improves it, and it can improve their focus levels. Help them create a cleaning routine with a chart and even a possible reward system if they struggle to follow through. The next thing that we want to talk about is incorporating sensory toys. And there's plenty of options out there on the market, for you to consider. We'll just scroll through a few here for you to look at. But a survey found that 70% of parents who use sensory tools report a decrease in anxiety for their children during stressful situations. That could be weighted blankets, noise canceling headphones, or any thing like that that really helps them adapt in the moment. The next thing is again helping them establish those routines and keep them. Particularly with ADHD, they can really, really struggle with routine maintenance, whereas autism has an extreme need for routine that makes them feel safe and secure. So, with either or, you're going to need to give routine support. Some might also have strong preferences for repetition, such as favorite foods, shows, or other things that help them regulate their moods. And so, trying to work with them and their natural tendencies as much as possible really, really helps. And then guide them towards preferred routines or other methods by using choice when presenting food, events, or other kinds of demands. The next thing is really fostering that open communication, and that means encouraging the deep discussions about emotions, thoughts, and experiences. Because they may have differences and go through a wide range of emotional experiences, it's really important to dig in here. Some children may experience impulsivity or reactive emotions with ADHD, or struggle with interoception and emotional expression with autism. Either of these neurotypes can impact regulation, emotional sensitivity, or emotional processing. ADHD kids are sometimes labeled as overly sensitive or rejection sensitive, and autistic children are sometimes labeled as lacking empathy. These types of labels often land as criticisms that these kids hear in various ways across other interactions as well. But notions like these can reinforce a negative self image or impact self esteem if they begin to believe that their feelings are not normal or unwelcome. If they continue to get these kinds of negative pressures externally, it leads them to internalizing and more deep suppression of their feelings, which can make them more anxious or even depressed in time. They may experience their feelings differently, but they still deserve space to be processed. The other thing to mention is that these kids are not really lacking empathy as much as they are lacking awareness or a depth of context and understanding. Neurodivergent kids can show empathy for their peers and families, but they may miss some social cues or struggle to maintain some forms of communication that help maintain relationships due to the way that they process information and experience the world. It is not that they intend to ignore others or their interests, it is often that they get wrapped up in their own experiences. The theory of the double empathy problem attempts to explain the gap between neurodivergent experience and the more neurotypical ways of communicating. And I really suggest you guys take a look at that if you're interested in that topic. The next thing is that I really would like to invite you all to consider going for more support. It can be really difficult, and learning from others who have been in those shoes really can make a difference. We have a new network for caregivers on our website, and we have groups for ADHD, groups for autism, a group for students, and a group for caregivers. So please feel free to come and take a look at that. I would like to close out by saying that embracing your child's uniqueness leads to a journey filled with more authentic joy and well being for you both. With patience, love, and understanding, caregivers can empower their neurodivergent children to lead more rich and fulfilling lives. We'd love to know your thoughts or hear about your experiences parenting on the spectrum. Leave us a comment or consider sharing this article if you found it helpful. Thanks for watching Navigating Neurodiversity with Kaleidoscope Support. Follow the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, or social channels to join the conversation.